I straightened the silk blouse over my shoulders, the soft ivory fabric brushing against my skin, and stared out at the city skyline from my apartment window. The late afternoon sun spilled gold across the glass buildings, but it couldn't touch the tight knot in my stomach. My phone buzzed again on the marble counter, vibrating insistently. I picked it up, trying to mask the tremor in my fingers. Family reunion this Sunday. Dad insists. I exhaled slowly, a bitter laugh escaping.
Dad.
The man who had once called me the family loser in front of everyone, laughing like it was a joke. Like it wasn't a scar he had carved into my chest years ago. I ran a hand through my hair, glancing at the envelope on the table. The one I'd kept hidden all this time. I had built a life far away from that judgment, a life filled with late-night victories, quiet independence, and the kind of success my father never imagined I could achieve. And yet, the thought of seeing him, hearing that voice again, made my stomach twist in ways it hadn't in years. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the fridge and the distant city noise. I could almost feel his gaze hovering over me, even when he wasn't there. But this time would be different. I wasn't the girl he had laughed at. I wasn't fragile, I wasn't dependent, and I wasn't going to stay silent. I slid the envelope into my handbag, the edges crisp under my fingers. Sunday couldn't come soon enough. I was 16 when the words hit me like a slap across the face. We were at the family reunion, the same hall that smelled of cheap perfume and overcooked food, and Dad's voice carried across the room like a weapon. "You'll always be the family loser," he said, eyes narrowing at me, a smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. The laughter around him felt like a spotlight on my shame, each chuckle drilling into my chest. My hands shook so violently I could barely grip the fork in my trembling fingers. I remember the sting of tears I refused to let fall, the lump lodged firmly in my throat. I wanted to disappear, to vanish from the room, and never come back. Every glance from my cousins, every snicker from my uncles, made me feel smaller, less than. After the party, I walked home under the fading sunset, my school bag heavy on my shoulder, and wondered if I would always be the girl everyone wrote off. I thought of the envelope I had hidden in my drawer that night, a gift from Grandma Eleanor, my only supporter in the family, the one who whispered, "Don't let their words define you, Lily. You write your own story." Her handwriting on the envelope was elegant, a stark contrast to the chaos of my thoughts. For when you're ready to show the world who you really are. I didn't know what that meant then, but I held it close like a talisman, feeling a flicker of courage amid the hurt. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining a future where I wasn't laughed at, where my accomplishments weren't footnotes in someone else's story. I promised myself I'd leave that house, leave that ridicule, and find a way to prove, if not to them, then to myself, that I was capable of greatness. It wasn't instant, of course. The fear stayed, whispering that I wasn't enough, that maybe he was right. But Grandma's envelope, that small act of faith, became the hinge I clung to, the reminder that independence wasn't just an idea, it could be real, and it could be mine. By the time I packed my bags and stepped onto the bus to the city where no one knew my name, I felt the first real spark of freedom. I was leaving the family loser behind, but I carried her memory as fuel. I would rise. I would thrive. And one day, he would see her standing tall, unbroken, with every word he ever threw at me turned into my own quiet power. City life was nothing like I had imagined at 16. The streets were alive with noise. The subway smelled of coffee and sweat, and every face I passed seemed too busy to notice me, or so I hoped. I rented a tiny studio apartment, its walls bare except for the envelope from Grandma Eleanor pinned above the desk. I called it my launch pad, though at the time, it felt more like a bunker. I had a part-time job at a boutique marketing firm, answering phones, filing paperwork, and taking notes during endless meetings. My first day, I spilled coffee on the desk of my new mentor, Miss Carter, a seasoned strategist with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue. Instead of scolding, she laughed, a warm, rolling sound that somehow made me feel seen. "You've got something, Lily," she said. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Her faith was like water to a parched plant. I threw myself into every task with a ferocity I didn't know I had, learning late into the night about strategy, sales, networking, and branding. I failed often. I burned presentations, missed deadlines, froze in front of clients. Every failure burned, but I refused to quit. Grandma's envelope reminded me daily that every stumble was part of a larger journey. Slowly, small victories began to appear. I landed my first client who trusted me with a modest campaign. The thrill of their praise, of seeing numbers improve because of something I crafted, was intoxicating. I celebrated quietly, alone, because I didn't want my family to see or to take credit for what I was building. Months turned into years. I saved, I studied, I networked. I moved from that tiny studio to a loft with sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. I started investing, launching side projects, testing ideas that made friends scoff and mentors nod. My confidence grew, tempered by the nights I questioned every choice, wondering if I was truly capable of escaping the shadow of the family loser. By the time I turned 25, I owned a small but thriving consulting business. I signed clients without flinching, negotiated deals with ease, and began mentoring others the way Ms. Carter had mentored me. And through it all, my family had no clue. Social media posts were vague, deliberately modest. Occasional messages from relatives arrived, curious about my success, but I smiled behind the screen and said nothing. I carried my envelope everywhere in my mind, not just as a physical reminder of Grandma's faith, but as proof that resilience could create miracles. Every late night, every challenge, every small win stacked into a life I had built entirely on my own. And yet, the quiet hope that one day my father would see me, not the version he laughed at, not the girl he dismissed, but the woman I had become, burned steadily beneath my calm exterior. I wasn't doing this for revenge, exactly. I was doing it to honor every whispered word of belief I had ever received, to prove to myself that I could rise above ridicule, above dismissal, and above the shadow of a father's judgment. And soon, the time would come to turn that quiet triumph into a confrontation he would never forget. Sunday arrived with a weight I hadn't felt in years. I stepped out of my car, smoothing the tailored blazer over my shoulders, and felt the familiar thrum of anticipation and nerves. The family reunion was at the same country club where Dad had humiliated me all those years ago. Only now, nothing about me was the same. I walked into the grand hall, the smell of polished wood and floral arrangements filling the air. My relatives' laughter carried across the room, just as it had years ago, but this time, I wasn't shrinking under it. I spotted Dad near the bar, flanked by a group of cousins and his cronies. His eyes caught mine, and for a split second, I saw recognition flash, followed by that old smirk, still so infuriatingly familiar. I let them take it all in. The heels clicking against the marble floor, my confidence stride, the air of someone who had carved her own place in the world. I stood for a moment at the edge of the room, letting silence do the work my words hadn't yet earned. I could see the subtle shift in their expressions, the pause, the sudden awareness that the girl they had dismissed was no longer a shadow. "Dad," I said finally, my voice calm, unwavering. He turned fully, finally giving me his full attention. I could see the surprise flicker across his face. "Do you remember the envelope you once ignored? The one I carried through every single step of my life?" He blinked. "What? Lily, what are you?" I reached into my handbag and pulled out the envelope, placing it deliberately on the polished mahogany table between us. It wasn't just a symbol anymore. It was tangible proof. "This isn't just a letter, Dad. It's the start of the life you didn't believe I could have. And now, I think it's time you understood what you missed." I let the room absorb it, letting the tension stretch. Slowly, deliberately, I revealed the truth. My consulting firm, now a mid-sized powerhouse with clients across the country. My loft, my investments, the revenue I generated each quarter. Each word landed like a stone dropped into still water, creating ripples of disbelief across the faces surrounding me. Dad's smirk faltered. His posture stiffened. He opened his mouth, searching for the words he didn't have. Cousins shifted in their chairs, whispers filling the space as their admiration and guilt collided. You did all this?" He finally managed, voice tight with a mixture of astonishment and something that looked suspiciously like shame. I nodded, letting my eyes meet his squarely. "I did. And it wasn't easy. Every step forward was a fight, every one a testament to what I learned from those who truly believed in me." My gaze swept the room, landing on faces that had once doubted me, dismissed me, even laughed at me. "This envelope," I said, touching it gently, "wasn't just paper. It was faith. And now it's proof." The room fell silent, heavy with realization. Some of them lowered their eyes, others swallowed hard, and Dad, my father, the man who had once declared me a loser, looked at me in a way I had never seen before. Not pride, not admiration yet, but recognition. He knew, finally, that the girl he laughed at had become a woman he could not ignore, a force of her own making, untouchable by the ridicule of the past. I placed the envelope back into my bag. The moment was mine. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't yell, I didn't need to. The truth was enough. Every word, every success, every silent victory I had accumulated now spoke louder than any argument, any denial, any past humiliation. I was no longer invisible. I was undeniable. The room remained quiet, still processing the revelation, and I realized something profound. I wasn't here to gloat. I was here to set boundaries, to redefine the rules that had governed our family for decades. I was no longer the girl they could dismiss, and now I had the choice of how to wield that power. "Before anyone says anything," I began, my voice steady but warm, "I want to be clear. I'm not here to punish. I'm here to offer a chance, on terms that make sense for everyone." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. "But those terms come with conditions. Conditions you need to meet if you want to be part of my life on equal ground." Dad's jaw tightened, and I met his gaze without flinching. "First," I said, "you acknowledge your past. Not just the words, but the dismissive attitude, the way you underestimated me. No more denial, no more minimizing. Honesty is non-negotiable." I turned to my older cousin, who had always whispered that I'd never amount to anything. "You will pursue what inspires you, not what you think will impress others. Stop chasing validation and start chasing growth." I addressed my younger siblings next, the ones who had absorbed the family hierarchy like gospel. "You will respect yourselves enough to set boundaries. You don't have to follow old patterns of approval or competition. Find your own path and support each other instead of tearing one another down." There was tension in the air, but I kept my tone even, gentle yet firm. Compassion didn't mean weakness. Firmness didn't mean cruelty. "I will continue to help where I can," I said, "but it will be in ways that encourage independence, responsibility, and self-respect. I won't rescue anyone from their own choices, but I will provide guidance if you are willing to earn it." The envelope, the symbol of my journey, remained tucked away, no longer just a keepsake, but a reminder that growth and resilience were what earned access to my life. I had been powerless once, but that power had been reclaimed, tempered with grace and wisdom. I saw small signs of change even in that room. Dad's eyes softened, a flicker of understanding there, as if he were measuring the gap between his old self and the woman standing before him. Cousins and siblings leaned in, listening, hesitant but receptive. For the first time, our family hierarchy didn't rest on fear or judgment. It rested on choice and accountability. I wasn't just giving conditions, I was offering a blueprint for a healthier, stronger family dynamic. It was transformative, and the authority I held was rooted not in wealth alone, but in the quiet confidence of someone who had survived ridicule and emerged whole. By the end of the afternoon, a subtle shift had occurred. They understood. Respect and effort were required if they wanted to remain in my orbit. I wasn't the girl they once mocked, and I wouldn't allow old habits to dictate our future. The power had shifted, quietly but irrevocably. Weeks passed after the reunion, and change began to ripple through the family. Dad called more often, Not with lectures, but with genuine questions about my work, my life, even my travels. My cousins sent messages about pursuing projects they had long shelved, inspired in ways they wouldn't admit aloud. My younger siblings started setting boundaries and making choices independently, something that would have seemed impossible months before. I watched it quietly, sipping coffee in my loft, sunlight streaming across the desk where Grandma Eleanor's envelope had rested so many years ago. I didn't intervene unless asked. I let them stumble, let them learn, knowing that true growth could only come from their own efforts. And every time I saw progress, even small, tentative steps, it felt like validation not just for me, but for the journey I had endured. Sometimes I thought back to that day at 16, standing in the country club hall, my father's words cutting deeper than any blade. It had seemed like the end of the world then, a label I feared I could never escape. But here I was, stronger, accomplished, independent, and at peace. The hurt remained, a quiet reminder of what I'd overcome, but it no longer defined me. I took out the envelope once more, feeling the familiar texture under my fingers. It was more than paper. It was a testament to resilience, to the faith someone had placed in me when even I doubted myself. Folding it carefully, I tucked it into a drawer, knowing that while the past had shaped me, it didn't control me. And in that moment, I realized the truth I had been chasing all along. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving to myself that I could rise above, create a life of my own making, and still carry compassion for those who had faltered along the way. Strength wasn't measured in wealth or applause. It was measured in grace, in integrity, and in the courage to define your own worth. I leaned back, looking out at the city skyline once more. The world was wide, full of opportunity, and I was ready for all of it. And if Dad ever looked at me now, or anyone else did, they wouldn't see the family loser. They would see a woman who had weathered every storm, who had taken the sharpest words and forged them into wings. I smiled softly, whispering to myself as the sun dipped behind the horizon, I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm thriving.